I'm Alan Colmes. I want to welcome back to our microphones Dr. Ron Paul, the congressman from Texas, served in Congress on and off for almost 30 years, ran for president in 1988 as a Libertarian Party candidate, sought the Republican nomination this time around. Dr. Paul, thank you so much for coming on once again.
Good to be with you again.
Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
You recently were asked about the statements of Rick Perry, the governor of Texas, about what he said about secession, and here's what you said.
It stirred the media, and believe me, it really stirred some of the liberal media where they started really screaming about what is going on here. This is un-American. I heard one individual say, this is treasonous to even talk about it. Well, they don't know their history very well because if they think about it, it's an American tradition. It's very American to talk about secession. That's how we came into being. 13 colonies seceded from the British and established a new country. So secession is a very much of an American principle.
Now, people heard you say that, Dr. Paul. Do you prefer to be called Dr. Paul or Congressman Paul?
Or sometimes just Ron. It's okay, too.
All right, I understand.
It doesn't matter. But,
right.
you know, doctors are still more popular than the politicians.
Yeah, I got you. Well, I'll go with doctor. So a lot of people heard you say that and said, oh, my God, he wants Texas to secede from the Union. But that's not what you were saying exactly, right?
No, I mean, I want the debate to go on. I want that principle to be alive. But even the governor, he wasn't advocating secession, but he was just pandering a bit to, you know, the very conservative element because he's in a tough race. Yeah. But no, I don't think it should be off the books because I think that if you always had that hanging out there that if you abuse the individual states at the federal level, they would have another option. I think they would be more cautious. They wouldn't be overruling some of the state laws like they're doing in California now with, you know, marijuana and the feds come in and they arrest people like that. So under this threat where a state, if they get fed up, they could do something about it. So I was just arguing on principle that you should at least hold that out as an option because some who say that you talk this way, that it's treasonous and un-American, and I think that's too strong of a criticism for anybody.
But you don't think it's likely? I mean, but I guess what's unusual is when you have a governor of a state talk about the succession of his state. That's rather unusual.
Yeah, it is. But once again, I don't think he was calling for it, and it's not likely. But I do think that something could happen because of the terrible climate that we live in economically, where the federal government may lose control. If they lose control of the value of the dollar, I mean, all kinds of things could happen. We've never quite gone through that except at the time of our revolution, where the continental dollar was destroyed. But that, to me, could invite people from just disregarding the federal government because the federal government they couldn't just keep creating money. Our national debt last year went up, in the previous 12 months, it went up $2 trillion. So this is nothing to sneeze at, and they can't do it. Eventually, see, I've argued the case that the empire will end. I want to bring all the troops home and do it gradually and gracefully, but the Soviet empire ended for economic reasons, and ours will end too for economic reasons.
Are we in the same danger you believe the Soviet Union was in its last days?
Well, not as much danger because they had a totalitarian system much more ruthless than ours. But economically speaking, yes, we could have a calamity. The financial structure collapsed because it was built on debt and speculation and pyramiding of all these instruments. So that has ended, and the financial situation is so much worse. The dollar still exists, and people will still buy dollars, and I think there's a pretty strong collusion among our central banks to buy up dollars and prop this thing up. But you can't create trillions and trillions of dollars out of thin air and expect the world to keep taking them. We're getting a free ride, and they're on a buy, like the Chinese are starting to buy treasury bills again. They quit for 2 months, but this last month they started buying them up again because they have over $1 trillion of them. So they're in hawk as well, but they can't last. If that were the case, we as Americans wouldn't have to work. We could just print the money and buy what we need.
Well, I want to squeeze a call or two in here for you but let me ask you, move on to another topic here. Your comments on the pirates I found most fascinating when you said that the situation in your own, I believe you wrote this piece, that the situation's not unlike the situation with the non-state thugs that perpetrated the attacks on 9/11, that these are non-state thugs, as you put them. They're not countries. Yet we went to war with countries after 9/11, and there are those who were talking about going into Somalia, which would be a total misdirection of what we need to do.
And they're also, this administration already suggested that we put troops into Eritrea, which is, supportive of Somalia, the radicals in Somalia, but in between is Ethiopia, and we more or less have control of Ethiopia. And Bush sent the Ethiopian troops in there to try to do what Clinton tried to do with our military and failed. It's just so messy. And I just think we should stay out of there, and the last thing we need is another war. I mean, this piracy is a serious problem, but
you want to arm private shipping companies and owners and operators, make sure they're weaponized.
Yeah. And just so they're not vigilantes, they're authorized, that they're deputized in what they do to defend themselves. They have protection. But these letters of marque and reprisal written in our early history were very precise and told them what they could do, and they had to act within law, within international law. So it wasn't like that we were just turning these people loose and going and shooting up. And it's a little bit different than just having hired guns. It's allowing these individuals to be armed. And I argued this same case with 9/11 is once a state attacks you, you're liable to have a government. Our government has done it. They just go out and start another war.
Well, that's what we've created, more terrorism since 9/11.
Right. And I just think that the founders were rather astute in having a provision where you could deal with the violence without going to war. And right now, more so than ever, we're in an age which we call the fourth generation warfare, where essentially all the battles now are being performed by non-governments. There's so many of these people aren't governments, and you just can't. We can beat anybody. We can destroy every army 10 times over with our weaponry, but we don't have any automatic victory in Iraq. We're not going to win that much of a victory in Afghanistan. It may bring us to our knees.
Let's go to Ed here in Harker Heights, Texas, with Congressman Ron Paul. Ed, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Yes, I think that the succession topic is very, very interesting to at least leave on the table, that it should be debated. I was wondering if you can provide any data to suggest that if the money we pay in as income tax to the federal government, is that more or less than the money that the state of Texas receives from the federal government as far as certain programs being funded?
Without being absolutely certain, I say that we're not the worst off and we're not the best off, but we don't get every cent back. Another analogy I think is worth thinking about is we belong to the UN. 25% of the people want us out of the UN. 75% say it's okay. But right now we pay a larger proportion, more than anybody else, but also we don't have the votes with us. We boycotted a function this weekend because we didn't have the votes, and they were liable to vote something against Israel. So would the American people say, we can never secede from the United Nations? We should be able to leave the United Nations if it doesn't serve our
Would you be
interests.
leaving, thank you, Ed, for the call. Would you leave the United Nations, Dr. Paul, if you had your way?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think if there were provisions where people could negotiate and talk and bring about peace, but they have perpetuated war and caused war conditions. Their first big episode was to authorize the war in Korea, so and they don't even have it under their charter.
So you'd get out. You just turn tail and run and get the UN out of the United States.
Yeah, I would, but that means I would want real diplomacy and not this pretense of diplomacy where they go and talk and try to pass resolutions.
How's Obama doing in terms of diplomacy? I mean, he's certainly taken a different course than President Bush, who was terrible at diplomacy. Isn't this president at least taking steps in the right direction by extending his hand out to other countries?
It's interesting that you ask that, because that's exactly what I've been thinking about, because tomorrow the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, will be before our committee, and I will be addressing that subject, and I am going to compliment her. I think the tone has definitely been improved, but I'm going to ask questions on where are some real changes. Have we brought a single military officer, a troop home? Have we expanded our troops? Have we expanded the war in Afghanistan and Pakistan? And, I think their tone is much better, and I think our image is improving, but we also ultimately have to change policy. Right now, there's a lot, both on left and right, believe that policy really hasn't changed any.
I'd like to ask you if you. We got to take a break here, but I'd love to ask you about the torture memos. If that's something you'd like to talk about, because the big debate now is: do we prosecute? Do we go after these lawyers who wrote the memos? Do we move forward and not look backwards at the Bush administration? You care to hold on for a second and talk about that?
I'll do that.
All right, we'll continue with Dr. Ron Paul. We will ask him about that. The big news of the day in terms of the president saying he's not averse to looking at least the people who wrote those torture memos and perhaps having a commission to investigate it. And we will then get to your calls at 877-4-ALLEN, 877-367-2526. We're online at allen.com. And coming up later tonight, how you can be green and be in doing what God wants at the same time.